Okay, do we want to get started back up again?
I think we're ready.
Okay. So if you have been here all afternoon, you have been graced by some wonderful speakers. My brain was going so fast at one point that I thought, oh my gosh, it's going to explode. But it has been an afternoon, so we're going to kind of wind down at this point. We have a panel of family members who have been down the inclusive education path and are going to share some reflections with us about their experiences. I started to say the word minefield or battlefield, and I thought, well, no, I probably shouldn't be so political. I should probably say path instead. Although I suspect that for all of the parents on the call, battlefield might actually be a pretty accurate term to use. So the panelists that we have are, I think we might actually be missing one, but the panelists that we have here today are Corey Merchant, and you'll have to forgive me because I can't see every single panelist at the same time, but I know Corey Merchant is here. We have Denise and Steve Smith, a husband and wife duo, each of whom, as I understand it, kind of took different roles or played different roles in their inclusive advocacy for their son. And then we have Susan Pinnell. Am I missing anyone? Did I grab everybody who was supposed to be on the panel and is here?
That's it.
Okay. All right. Well, let's get started. I'm going to throw out a question to kind of get the discussion rolling. And honestly, I don't intend to heavily moderate this panel. I think everyone has so many thoughts that they could share. I just see it kind of arising organically. So I'll just kind of make sure that we give people equal time and we let people from the audience respond and ask questions. So let me get started with my beginning prompt. So for our four panelists, Corey and Susan and Denise and Steve, I want you to think back to that moment in time that you knew your advocacy battle, I'll just use the term, had been all worthwhile. What was your child doing at that moment in time when you said to yourself, oh yeah, this was totally worth it? Think about what that picture looked like. Take a little Polaroid in your brain. And I'm going to ask each one of you to describe from your perspective what that highlight, what that best moment was for you. Because I want to start on a high note. So for Denise, you're right next to me on my Hollywood squares of Zoom callers. So let me call on you first.
Okay. Earlier, I started writing down some things about the highs and the lows of our experience because our son Bradley is 35 now. And so and he works at Publix and he has a better life than I do, quite honestly, because I'm always taking him to all of his things. So I guess that there have been several points through our whole 35 years with him that I thought, okay, I can keep going. I can keep going. The first one was when we lived in Texas when he was first, up until he was almost 9. And he was in a kindergarten class. Now he was pretty nonverbal. He was not walking. He has Down syndrome, but he also has a multitude of medical issues, more than most kids with Down syndrome have, I think. And so he had a lot of medical battles, and he was not doing anything. But we really, really wanted him to be included in a general education kindergarten class. Back in Texas, it was only a half a day class because they didn't take federal money for their kindergarten. And so he was in an afternoon kindergarten class with, typical 5-year-olds, which was really kind of a barrier for us too, because he still took a nap, but we worked through that. By the end of that year, he was not taking a nap. But I took in the obligatory cupcakes for his birthday in March. and I was sitting next to this little sister of one of my other boys' friends. And I said, so I hear Bradley is sometimes can have some behaviors in this class. And she looked at me and she said, yeah, but he's still my friend. And I was like, okay, this is it. And then later on, the teacher told me at the end of that kindergarten class, because she went into this kicking and screaming, she said, these kids are more prepared for first grade than any other class I've ever had. And they have learned to adapt. They've learned to be more independent. They've learned to be better helpers. They've just learned to be critical thinkers. And she said they're more prepared than any other kindergarten class I've ever had. And I think that was the first, oh, I may tear up here a minute. That was the first aha when I thought, yes, because, I've been called the mother from hell for 35 years.
And you have some folks that are waving their hands. Yeah.
So, but that was the impetus that I always go back to, that milestone that I always go back to and say, yes, this has been worth it. Now I have a list of other things that kept us going, but that's the number one thing that I think first gave me that push.
And thankfully it started early in Bradley's life. You had a taste of success early.
Well, because his mother was a mother from hell.
Right. All right, let's go to Corey, who has dubbed herself a mother from hell number 2. Corey, what was your magic moment? What was George doing when you realized, yeah, this all was worth it? I handled it. You there, Corey?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Now we can.
Okay, good. So I think, so let me just start by saying that my son George is in 6th grade this year. He also has Down syndrome. And so for me, it's every day that I mean, every day there's something new that makes me realize, and I'll just use the word too, the fight, the continuous pushing, the continuous meetings with school administrators has been worth it, because I just know that he's being exposed to things socially and academically that he would never have experienced had we not really pushed for inclusion. And there have been days, as you said, there are days where I think I've called my husband and going, I give up, where I just want to throw my hands up and give up. And sure enough, that afternoon when I pick up George from school at 3:00, he says something or shows me something or talks about something that makes me go, nope, we're still in this fight and we're still going to keep pushing forward with inclusion as our main goal, and in our community and in our school. I think the other day, I'll give you an example. So he is in middle school band, beginner band this year. And we have a fabulous band instructor who is just all in. And we're in the car and we're riding along, and I'm changing radio stations, and I'm not really paying attention to the music that's playing. And all of a sudden George goes, oh my gosh, did you hear that? Did you hear the crescendo in that musical piece? And I was like, I had to really go back to, oh, what is a crescendo? And did I hear a crescendo? I'm not sure I did, but I knew right then and there that, again, whatever hurdles we've had to overcome, whatever barriers have been placed in our way have been completely worth it, from an academic standpoint, but also a social standpoint, because when we're out in our community, there's, other students who see George, they recognize George, they talk about George in class and what they're working on. And it's just it's been worth it every step of the way.
Okay. How about, we'll go with Susan Pinnell next. Are you there, Susan?
I am here.
What was your magic moment when you realized, yeah, this fight is worth it?
Yeah, I have a 14-year-old son with complex medical need, autism, and ADD. So actually this year, Nancy, has actually been one of our best years. So one of the things that we've struggled with the last 4 years, he has some learning disabilities in math. And I've struggled with our school system just to recognize that he has a learning disability, work on treating the learning disability, And actually this year, which was amazing, they have a class, a typical class of math. It's just a slower pace math. And so we got to participate in that. They've never had that for 8th grade before. And our child has never been able to do any honor society or anything like that because he's always making a C or D in math. And this 6 weeks, or actually last 9 weeks, and this one, he'll be making B's in math, and he got inducted in the Beta Club. So that brought a lot of tears. Just we fought for so long for him to be able to be part of something, and that was great. He played football this year, which was really something I thought would never happen, but they accommodated him and really made him a part of the team. So all the years that we have continued to have meetings and knock on doors and continue to talk to them, they have really started, unfortunately now we're going to the, the high school, so I'll have to start all over again. But at least this year, they've really heard us and given him a chance to excel, and his self-confidence has really soared. And another just funny thing is that he has a social skills class that he goes to at lunch. And now there's 13 typical kids that are his people that go with him. And the the lady that runs it, she's executive function social skills. She said, now this is the strongest group I've ever had because Ben brings his posse every single day to lunch. So just a lot of people have finally started coming around him and making him successful. And so it's all been worth it for sure.
Okay. Now let's go to Steve, better known as Mrs. Denise Smith. And I know Steve really well, so he won't be offended that I described him that way. Steve, what was the day that you realized that your fight for Brad, this was all worthwhile? You hit a high note when it came to inclusion.
Well, one of the early funny stories for me was he was in elementary school here in Alabama, and the teacher let us know that he'd gotten up on the desk, took off his shirt, and was singing "I'm Too Sexy for My Shirt," because all his classmates around him put him up to it. And it was not a negative event, okay? But we just all had fun with that. And the teacher rolled with it too, so that was cool. Obviously today that might cause a problem, but that was a different day. But to me, the thing that makes it worthwhile is the response of the community to him, whether it's where he works his part-time job or in church or out in the community. Anybody that knows him comes to him. They compete for his attention. That's what makes it worthwhile to me, because after all, the people with different abilities, we all have the same desires, and that is to be a part of community, to be accepted.
Okay. I want to now kind of flip from the best day to kind of the darkest day. What was the day when you thought, I'm just really struggling here with getting this school environment to see my son for the person, or daughter, for the person that he or she is? And how did you work through it? What advice would you give to the folks on this call in this partners class for what they could do when they're having that darkest day? Let's do reverse order. We'll go back to you, Steve.
The most important thing is, if you're married, to be together. 80% of marriages of where there's a person with a disability involved in divorce. So being together is critical. Being at the meetings together is important, and we did that every time because people come at you on purpose. And you have that check when you have that other person with you. And you have the ability to de-stress a little quicker after the meeting. But the hardest thing is knowing that the administration doesn't want to try to do the things to include your child because it costs money. That's that. Oh, that just that always ran all over me. And I know it's illegal, right? You can't do that, right? But they do it. So is that what you were asking, Nancy?
Yes, yes, that's perfect. That's perfect. How about you, Susan? What tips do you have that in retrospect got you through your darkest days?
I'm sorry, one more thing, Nancy.
Yeah,
I know
sure.
there's some here that are not married. Take somebody else with you. Take a friend. Have another person there with you, if at all possible. That's it.
Mhm.
I think some of the things for me is just to grieve. I think sometimes I've just pushed through to the next battle without really grieving the one that I was going through, and being okay with processing those emotions, talking to a friend, being just sad that we were walking through those hard times. And it caused me to, I think, build up in the past a little bit of a trauma response of all the things we've walked through, just the medical part and just having people not listen. But the great thing is that expressing my emotions and walking through them really helped me be able to, hit the next battle because it's coming for sure. So that's really what's helped me, is have friends around me, have other people that I know of that I can call, and that are going through the same thing that I am. It just really helped a whole lot.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that, Susan. How about you, Corey? What got you through your darkest days of fighting for Georgia's inclusion, and what advice would you give our partners about that?
Yeah, so I'm kind of like Susan. I know there's more to come. So I think, so you kind of have to remember. I think for me is also remembering. So we transitioned this year to middle school from elementary school. And I'll just be honest with you, our elementary school, we went through 3 different principals, 5 different special education coordinators, and from 1st to 5th grade. And so every year it seemed like I was having to reteach them, re-educate them, but also I was guilty of carrying some negative thoughts into those meetings, even though it was a new group of people. So sometimes I have to back up and remind myself that there's always going to be a new person in the meeting, and they might be that champion. They might be the champion that I need. So when I come in, I need to come in fresh and positive, determined, but fresh and positive, because there may be a champion lurking in that room that I have never met before. And that's happened so many times. I have to remind myself of that. The other thing that, some of the darker days for me are not necessarily the local things, but are the state level issues that just keep coming. Lack of professional development provided by the state, some lackadaisical, I will say, mentality at the state level related to special education. And that's what gets me the most, I think. And so I keep plugging away and trying to make a difference there. And that's why I think partners in policymaking is so important, because legislatively, we've got to make some changes at the state level to impact special education at the local level. So, just always be on the lookout for that champion. And when you find them, bear hug them and don't let them go. And those are the things that kind of have gotten me through some of the darker times and helped me know that around the corner there's another person that, you know, I need to be positive and hopefully get them on my team.
All right, Denise, we'll wrap up this question with you. What
Okay.
what got you through your darkest days? So what advice do you have for your partners?
I think
Class
the
here.
darkest day the first darkest day that we encountered was when the principal, as we were trying to get Brad into this inclusive kindergarten class, told me that my expectations for him were too high. And I looked at him and said, you know, they told us he wouldn't live till he was 6. And he's outlived all their expectations. So how can I put a limit on what he can accomplish? Because he's already shown us he's not going to follow the rules. He's going to play outside the box. And so the fact that if Steve wasn't able to go with me, I usually had one of my friends, Nancy Anderson, for one, has gone with me to IEP meetings or help me process things. Just have somebody to process it with. I tell you what, I've gone home from IEP meetings and crawled into bed and cried for 12 hours because it was just too hard. But the fact that that little guy gets up every morning, he lives with pain, he lives with a lot of medical issues, and you would never know that. So the fact that he gets up every day and ready to face the day is the thing that keeps me going, is because he does have a full life. He knows more people in Tuscaloosa than Steve and I will ever know. And people come up to him and talk to him, and we're like, how do you know him? Oh, well, I see him in the restaurant that he goes to Taco Tuesday in every Tuesday. Or he works at Publix, and you know, I always go to his line whenever I'm in Publix because it's so much fun. You know, just people like that. He's legally blind, and he has learned to use his iPad to call his friends on FaceTime. Now, I don't know how he does that, how he figured it out. So those kinds of things are just looking at my kid and the things that he's accomplished and the things that he's gone above and beyond people's expectations is the thing that keeps me going. But having that good support system to just go and fall all over and you know, snot cry with is such an important thing. And if you don't have that, then your partners right here in this room are those people that can be your backup. I still communicate with Steve and I both were in the partners class in 98 and 99, I think. And I still communicate with some of those partners. So that's just finding that good support system and keeping that dream in front of you, just keeping that dream.
Nancy, you started off saying that I was Mrs. Denise Smith. I'm better known as Brad's dad. Okay?
Probably. Yes, I think you're probably right on that one. All right, I want to, my next question actually touches on something that Corey raised, and it's really why this partners program is here in the first place. It's to create policy change. So to our panelists, I want to ask this question. Sitting where you are right now, when it comes to inclusive education, what is the policy change you either want to push for or would have pushed for? I mean, Brad, for instance, Brad's what, 35? Mm-hmm. So right now, inclusive education maybe isn't where you're focused. You might be focused on other things when it comes to inclusion. But going back, thinking about education, what is the what is the policy change you would want to see most to ensure that our schools and our communities were more embracing of inclusive education? And I'll just go in reverse order. I'll start with Denise this time.
Okay. I don't know if this is policy, but I would like to see our state put time, energy, effort, and money into doing model programs. And I thought they've done this in the past and it hasn't spread out to the rest of the state, but on how inclusive education can be implemented. What the people that we heard today, Steve and I sat in on the afternoon session, and the things that I don't remember the two ladies' names were at first, but the things that they talked about making that a priority for our kids in special education, or any of our kids, to have that opportunity to have that inclusive experience. The policy, the paradigm shift from segregation to integration, not integration, but inclusion, and not integration, the difference between those two things. I think that would be the policy change that I'd like to see happen. Because honestly, as everybody said, none of his peers have had any problems with him. It's been his educators who have a fear that they're going to be held responsible for something that he can't do, when that's not our goal at all. Our goal was to give him the best opportunity that we are not in denial about his, the things that he can and can't do. We live with it every day, 35 years now. But back when he was in school, if the 1 year that we did inclusive education correctly, it was a smashing success. And then we went to middle school and it dropped off.
You got 1 year where you thought that everything hit its mark.
Mhm.
Wow.
And that was because the teacher was wholeheartedly enthusiastic about it and made it happen.
Wow. All right, Corey, what about you? If you were to
Oh,
embark
Nancy, I
on
think you froze
policy change,
So I'll just go to
initiative right
Susan.
now,
What do you think?
what would that policy change be to foster more inclusive education?
Oh gosh, that's a loaded question. I've got like 5. Can I?
Well, I'm making you pick just one.
Oh, can I give 2? Can I
Oh,
talk 2? Okay. When it comes to policy and legislation, I think first of all, I've been talking about caseloads and the way Alabama code is written and their little loophole for what a case manager or caseloads for our special education teachers, speech therapists, and occupational therapists. I think that's got to be looked at, because I think that we are running people away from choosing special education as a career, because we haven't looked at the caseload maximums since the early 90s. And as we know,
a lot of nodding heads, Corey.
And special education has changed, and the numbers of students receiving and needing special education has changed. So I think that we are killing, well, I don't want to use the word killing, but we're overworking these teachers and so the word is out, and so people aren't choosing it as a career. Second would be, I think if we're going to have truly inclusive education, then our teacher education programs at our universities have to look at their curriculum, because if you're separating special ed and gen ed and they're being taught you are a general educator, you are a special educator, when they come out of school, then they consider themselves separate. So obviously they consider the students separate. And so I think we've got to look at teacher education programs and their setup. And I think it's time to do that, because we shouldn't be teaching teachers separately to think of themselves separately, because then that just pours over into the school setting. I'm a general educator. I don't teach special education students. That's not my job. And so that kind of flies in the face of inclusivity. And there have been some states who have done that. And I think it's time. So those are my top 2, but I could go on and on. So there you go.
All right, Susan Pinnell, what is your big shining policy change that you would like to see to ensure that your child going forward and the kids of tomorrow are offered a more inclusive education?
I know this is not policy change, but I would just like for them to be held to the standard that they're supposed to be meeting for right now. Because I work with parents all across the state, and there are multiple school systems that are not even doing what the normal, what the expectations are. And I think it's because there's lack of trained teachers. I think there's a funding issue, but if we could just get everybody to the standard that they're supposed to be at, I think that would be definitely life-changing.
Okay.
And I know,
So
Nancy, that's
do
what
what
you
you're
do all day
legally
long.
required to do now.
Hmm.
Yeah. Okay. And Steve, will round out with you. What is your big shining policy change that you would want to see to foster inclusive education?
Well, it goes along with what the others were saying. It's funding, training, expectations from our legislators of our educational professionals. Just in a nutshell.
Okay. So to round out,
Nancy.
oh
this
yeah,
is
go
the-
ahead, Denise.
And just to follow up on that, I think in our going back to what Corey was saying, educating our future teachers, that it's a segregated curriculum as well. It should just be one inclusive curriculum across the board. And instead of, and I agree, it's an us versus them, and it should never be that way.
So to round out the rest of our discussion this evening, and excuse the phone ringing in the background, I forgot to turn it off before we started. To round out the discussion, I want to kind of sum up what we heard today. So this question is actually for everybody. This isn't just for our panelists, but it's for everyone. You've heard, you've heard from two teacher of teachers, and we heard from Dan Habib. What is it that you heard that makes you feel hopeful and positive for tomorrow in terms of fostering that inclusive education?
She's attention whore.
And I'll just let, this can be wide open. Just raise your hand or shout it out.
I think, this is Veronica. I think what I think is going to be most powerful is hearing from the self-advocate themselves and hearing from Samuel. I'm very excited about that. Some of the most powerful and meaningful experiences I have been having those shared moments with self-advocates. When he mentioned Bob Williams earlier, Dan Habib, I don't know if I strongly recommend everyone getting to know more about him. I was part of a presentation where he had a complete 45-minute discussion with another AAC user with other disabilities, and they just completely just spoke to each other one-on-one about through their AAC, just about all their, Bob was mentoring this young man, and it was just to watch this experience was just so powerful. So I'm very excited to hear about Samuel tomorrow in person and listen to him and share with him.
Mm-hmm. And we have another self-advocate who's speaking tomorrow, Alexis Siegel from Florida. She's going to be doing one of the other trainings.
Nancy, this is Jenny.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, Miss Jenny.
I was just going to comment that finding alternative ways of educating not just people with disabilities, but educating all people at the same time, it falls along the lines of universal design for learning. And it reminds me of my friend Michael Warner back in high school. He has cerebral palsy. Back in high school, he was, because of his frontal lobe being missing, he's not able to do math. And so they didn't think he'd be very good with computers. But when it came around to the time when new computers were brought into the computer labs, he was the only one who knew how to hook them all up.
Yeah.
The teachers underestimated him. And if they had thought to, he volunteered and he got them all running.
That's a great story. And it is a lesson in not having lowered expectations, like Denise was saying earlier.
Right.
Any other thoughts about what makes you feel hopeful for the future when it comes to inclusive education? Steve, you want to comment?
Hearing experiences from other states and where it can work, for crying out loud. Because so much in Alabama doesn't work very well, to be honest. And just,
Mhm.
it's encouraging to see that we're not stupid and we're not trying to unload on the system. We're trying to make people realize that education includes the person, right?
Mhm.
Amen
Dr.
on that
Debbie, I
one.
might pick on you as an educator. What makes you hopeful? You're on not on the front lines.
What makes me hopeful is that I get to do this up until May and listen to all of the people in this room, different panelists that will be coming in. Basically, just hearing the concerns about how the school system as a whole in Alabama is handling situations, handling inclusion, and I've experienced a few myself. And as an educator, some people may think that my calling out some things that's not happening the way it should be happening, and being an advocate for that, and just to hear like Ms. Smith was talking about her son is like 35 now, and you're talking about a 35-year battle, 30-year battle, basically from the time that he in a kindergarten up until, now. And I love the concept of inclusion, and to hear our two speakers at the beginning talk about inclusiveness and how it's really supposed to be, opposed to just putting students in a corner, lowering expectations. Now I have something to take back to my educational facility, and now I can put those expectations out there for my faculty and staff, because I want them to become educated. I don't want them to have this mentality that the general education versus the special education teacher. I wasn't trying to do that. And that's the number one argument I hear all the time. I wasn't trained to do. Well, maybe we need to be trained to do that in everything. Maybe we just need to drop the label of general education, special education, and just educator. And you're responsible for educating the whole child, every child. And that's what I would like to see moving forward. And I'm just so hopeful. Being able to hear from all of you is pretty much encouraging me. When I step into that next IEP meeting, I'm listening to the parent, I'm listening to the concerns, I'm hearing what they have to say. They're not being unreasonable with the request, wanting to have their child included in that general education classroom, wanting that child to have 80% of that time in the classroom. And that's what I want. And that's one of the things, like I said, and I don't want to go into specifics, but when you go to the IEP meeting and the IEP team makes a decision as a whole that we're going to put this child in a self-contained classroom, opposed to that parent sitting there basically in tears, pleading for that child to remain in the general education classroom. I've had to deal with that in my 3 short years. I'm going into year 3 now as a principal. I've been an assistant principal, but as a school leader, there were times I was actually bothered by it. And you can't fight the system, so to speak. You get blackballed as a troublemaker and all of that. But I'm at this point where I don't care. I've had people in my life that have had disabilities, and I've been around it coming up, growing up. And I just think that as a whole, we need to see more inclusion in education. And that's what I'm not seeing. And when Mr. Habib put that chart up about the percentage of time that students spend in the classroom. 83% Alabama reported. I'm like, where did they get those numbers? You know, because I'm not seeing it where I am. I'm not seeing it, you know, where I came from. So where are they getting these numbers? Which schools? I want to know how they desegregate this data. Are they getting this information from the well-to-do school systems? What? Because the ones where we're Title I schools, poverty, socially disadvantaged, economically disadvantaged, I'm not seeing it. What we want to do is we want to stow those kids away into that resource room for probably, it's not 80% that they're in the classroom. We're probably seeing that those kids sit in the resource room probably 80% of the time and 20% in general education, when their IEP says they're supposed to be 80% in the classroom and then the 20% receiving those outside services as needed. So I'm sorry, I didn't mean to go on.
No. Well, you know, you as an educator can give us insights as to what's the thinking of, what the thinking is of other educators. So I think it's valuable for the class to hear. We only have a few more minutes and maybe we can wrap up a little bit early. I did want to note two things. Ironically, or serendipitously, I suppose, this is actually Inclusive Schools Week. Sort of a nationwide initiative to focus on inclusive schooling. I warrant that of all the activities that occurred in the state this year to celebrate Inclusive Schools Week, a lot of proclamations, that kind of thing. This was probably the most meaningful Inclusive Schools Week activity that occurred statewide. Next year, wouldn't it be awesome if we could build on this and really do something different and super meaningful for Inclusive Schools Week? With inclusion meaning more than just students with disabilities, but as our two initial speakers said, it's about all learners from whatever background they're from and whatever they bring to the classroom. So that's number one. The second thing I wanted to bring up is that DeLee Chambers, the State Director of Special Education Services, is willing to speak to the group at some point in a kind of a presentation, open Q&A opportunity. So maybe that's something that we can plan on one of those, I've been calling them bonus Wednesdays that Linda planned during the year. So maybe we can plan for her to come during one of those bonus Wednesdays, and you'll be able to share your thoughts, your ideas, your frustrations, your hopes with her. So unless there are any further comments from our panelists or from our partners, Linda, do you want to close us out?
Sure. Thank you again for everybody, for the panelists and for everybody that came in tonight and listened for the afternoon. We will be looking at your homework and looking at mentors that everyone responded to, and I will try and get all those out for you on Monday, and we'll try and fine tune what our projects are going to look like. I know you probably like to revise everything, you know, every time you come to a weekend in here, but we'll finalize those and then look for those bonus Wednesdays coming up. We don't have one till after the holidays, so I hope everybody has a great holiday season, and we will look to see you all next year.
Bye, everyone.
I did have one more question.
See you tomorrow.